Developments in the UAW strike as tens of thousands of auto workers return to work for the first time in more than a month. This morning, the UAW and GM coming to a tentative agreement. This comes as the union and Stellantis did the same over the weekend. Our Andres Gutierrez is live right now outside the GM redistribution plant in Pontiac. Andres?
Rochelle, this is only happening after the union applied additional pressure over the weekend by striking the GM assembly plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Right now, workers are waiting to get official word that the strike is over. In the meantime, they are holding the line. The morning crew just rolled out, the afternoon crew beginning to show up. We expect the terms of the tentative agreement to be similar to that of Stellantis and Ford, which includes a 25% pay raise and the restoration of the cost of living adjustment. GM did give a big concession at the beginning of the month by putting EV battery plant workers under the union's master agreement. It seemed that they were close to a deal on Friday after negotiating late into the night, but they hit a standstill then. And then on Saturday, the union called on almost 4,000 members to walk off the job in Tennessee. It happened just as UAW President Shawn Fain was announcing the tentative agreement with Stellantis, in which they will be adding another 5,000 jobs in addition to keeping the 5,000 they had threatened to cut. They're also reopening an assembly plant in Illinois, which closed last year. And now that the big three have reached a tentative agreement, we have to see how quickly the ratification process will go.
Until I kind of see what the details are, I'm a little cautious, but I'm excited to hear that they reached an agreement. It's about time. It's been a long 6 weeks or so, and I'm getting ready to get back to work and support my family.
And now remember, this strike was costing GM $200 million a week. We do anticipate an announcement from Fain to come down at some point this afternoon. Reporting live in Pontiac, Andres Gutierrez, CBS News, Detroit.
Andres, thank you so much for that live report. And we want to go ahead and get input on this monumental moment now. Joining us live through Zoom is Paul Eisenstein, the editor-in-chief of Headlight.News. Huge moments today and over the weekend for the auto industry. Let's go ahead and start with today's GM deal. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's the sort of deal we expected. When it comes to financials, it was all but certain going to be the exact same thing that they got from Stellantis and from Ford Motor Company, starting with $25% over the next 4.5 years, return of cost of living, improvements in pensions, and so on. This is very much in line with what we expected there. The devil in these details had to do with things like plant operations, whether or not workers would wind up being allowed to unionize at the new battery plant that GM is putting up down south, the one they have in Ohio, and so on. So those were the sticking points from what we understand. But at this point, it looks like everything fell in place, and the industry, at least the domestic industry, can now get back to work. One of the real questions is, what happens with the transplants, the foreign-owned factories around North America, particularly in the United States, and they're going to feel a lot of pressure right now to raise the rates that their workers get, even though they're non-union.
You and I have heard UAW President Shawn Fain talk a lot about how it's not just him in these negotiations, that it is the union membership as a whole. What do you think the consensus is there, whether it be Ford, GM, Stellantis? Are we going to see union membership be very enthusiastic about these deals and approve them? Do you think there's the potential we could have a little bit back and forth? What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly we're going to have some people that say, wait a second, Shawn, you promised us 40% when you laid down your list of 700 demands at the beginning of negotiations. The reality is, I think that we'll hear from a handful of people who will be very loud in talking about how it didn't come through the way that they expected. But these contracts, without some surprise, are going to be ratified by the workers at each of the three manufacturers.
Do you think Ford laying the groundwork that GM and Stellantis kind of had to do? You were talking about how similar they were, that largely is because of the groundwork that Ford laid and them thinking that they needed to rise to that same bar.
Yeah, as we've talked so many times over the last 6 weeks or so, this was a very, very unusual round of negotiations, starting with the fact that there was no individual strike target to begin with, the fact that they struck all three manufacturers simultaneously, and then only slowly ramped up the number of plants affected. The one thing in the end that was going to be the same was that we would see a pattern agreement. You weren't going to see GM with 20% in raises and very small cost of living or no cost of living allowances, while Ford would have 25 and very lucrative COLA. So in the end, we're back to pretty much what has always been the case. Pattern agreements with minor variations in the language to reflect the unique needs of each of the individual manufacturers.
Last question for you. Have you seen with any of the big three, if everything gets signed and, T's crossed, I's dotted, how long these contracts will be good for?
Yeah, this is supposed to be a 4.5-year contract, which is interesting. Forever, it was a 3-year contract. Over the last couple decades, it went to 4. Why 4.5? The only reason that I've been able to ascertain is that the UAW going forward would rather have workers in a position to strike when the weather is getting good, rather than being in a position where they'd have to be manning the picket lines when the weather, as your weather forecaster just mentioned, could be getting very bad.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. I'm sure the big three relieved to have a 4-year break potentially from these negotiations. Your insight always incredibly valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.